The following is an Operation Podcast production.
Because I think failure is necessary. If you're not failing, occasionally you're not pushing hard enough.
Failure.
Yeah.
I love it. It took me many years to get to a place to have this relationship and understanding of failure and what it can do for me. And I know a lot of people listening right now are here because maybe they feel like a failure, or they're letting the fear of failure stopping them before they ever start.
And it's that fear, as you talked about, a failure. That's the other big F word to me, because people let it stop them. Fear of embarrassment, judgment, exposure, any of that will stop you from starting if you let it. But here's the deal. If you stay the same, right? Because fear is an invitation to grow. And so if you stay the same, the only thing that staying the same ensures, it's not safety, because I think that's what people think. It's not safety. It is that no growth is possible. So in order to grow, you have to experiment, which means you're going to fail sometimes. And that means you're moving. You are progressing forward. Hey everybody, I'm Anne Marie Anderson, author of Cultivating Audacity, and I'm on Ever Forward Radio. You have to listen to it because we want to keep moving forward in an audacious life.
So I have in mind for this interview, this conversation, kind of three sections. When I was understanding failure, when I was kind of researching failure and more of your work, these three areas of it kind of stood out. And that's fear or failure
Right.
can prevent us from starting.
Right.
We have this concept of not wanting to fail once we do take action and get started. And then in my opinion, the inevitable failure that's going to come with any course of action we take.
Right.
So let's start there. Let's start with what is keeping us from starting, this concept of, or these questions of, what if I'm not ready? What if I fail? Why is failure keeping us from even taking the first step?
Because we think we have to succeed at everything. That's where we somehow were sold a bill of goods. Like, well, when you're ready, then it's time to go. We're never ready, Chase. We're never ready. And people talk about, especially for women, about the glass ceiling, but it's the sticky floor. We're just stuck to the floor waiting for the right moment when we have all the credentials, all the qualifications, the timing's right. We got the money, we got the time. It never arrives. And that's what stops us from starting. It's either fear, time, money, or your inner critic, chatting to you back there. When you're able to look at fear and understand it's going to be with you your entire life. People talk about conquer your fears. That's not going to happen. Your fear is a passenger in your car with you the whole time. So take it with you and start to learn from it. And what I advise people to do is fail first, and it freaks people out. But if you're afraid of failing, do the biggest thing first, fail, see that you survive it, and then learn from it and keep going. Because it's like, what's going to happen if we fail? Are we going to crumble? Are we going to disintegrate? Are we going to die destitute and alone? All those things have come into my own head.
Maybe, but that's only if we let them, right?
Right.
These are kind of always worst case scenarios that, in my experience, I haven't really seen happen.
No.
Right?
No. I tell people to catastrophize. Catastrophize your biggest fear. So if I can give you an example,
Please,
I'm a broadcaster, and I was a producer at ESPN for more than a decade. Then I decided I wanted to go on air. It's kind of an unusual way to go about it. So my first time on air was supposed to be on like a regional television football game, but some things happened. Somebody was unable to do it, and I got put on ESPN2 opening weekend of college football, my first time ever on live television, right?
Man.
78 million homes.
78 million.
78 million homes is what ESPN2 was in. First time ever live. And I think that the higher ups at ESPN, just because I'd always been producing, Super Bowl coverage and Olympics, I don't know. I don't think they realized it was my first time. I was in a complete panic outside the stadium, sobbing before going on air. Just what you want from your sideline reporter. Like, forget about makeup, right? Like, it's all just rushing down, ugly cry. And I was sobbing to my husband and saying, like, this is going to be horrible. I can't do this. And so he tries to calm me down. He says, well, what's the worst that can happen? We all love that scenario, especially when you're afraid of fear, because we've got ideas of what's the worst that can
possibly happen. I wasn't
happen.
Thinking about that, but I am now.
Yeah,
thanks a lot. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I said, okay, here's what can happen. I can be so bad on air, so bad that not only will I never be on air again, but I'll also never be able to produce again, because the people I produce for, who are all the big names, will say, I'm not going to listen to her. She can't do this. So I'll lose my whole career in television. And if I lose my whole career in television, I'm going to be a miserable person. And if I'm a miserable person, you can't stay with me because I won't be able to be a good mother to our children who aren't even born yet. I won't be able to be a good mother to our children who aren't even born yet. And I will die destitute and alone without a family or a job. And he was like, wow, you really went there. And I was like, yeah, of course that didn't happen. But I went on air and I was bad. I was choppy. I was everything I feared, and I survived. And that taught me a great lesson because the next week I went on again and I was just as bad, but it wasn't the first time. And so being able to come back time and time again proved that that catastrophe never happened.
Thank you for sharing that. It's anytime we relive difficult periods of our life, or quite literally the most challenging, the most novel, the most fearful, you're quite literally kind of reliving it in a sense.
Yeah.
You've come a long way and you're doing just fine now. So, which is, I think, a testament to what really awaits us on the other side of fear. I like to consider, and I would be curious your take on this, the alternative to fear is, I think, another big card in what keeps people from taking action. And it's, you catastrophize everything, right? But it's also the fear of, what if I really am successful?
Right.
What if I crush this interview? Or what if I do okay, but it's okay enough to get me the next opportunity, to show me how to get better? And then I do advance, and then all of a sudden I'm the thing, I'm the person.
Right.
That I always wanted. There's a level of fear, that comes with what if I actually succeed, not just what if I fail.
Right. And the measure of success, right, is measured differently from everybody. So if you are, let's say you succeed, what's the fear of the success? Are you afraid that people are going to come after you? They are. Are you afraid that you're going to be successful and then make a mistake that's going to cost you everything? Well, you're going to make a mistake. So some of it is that fear of success because you have an idea of what perfection's going to look like when you succeed. The whole thing is a continuum, Chase, right? Failure to success is an absolute continuum. So for me, you're never going to reach, like, where's success? If you have the number one podcast, is that success? You'll still feel shaky because now everybody's coming for you. So it's a matter of reframing our ideas of failure and success.
Could not agree more. And there's some great examples in there of, I think, what keeps us from starting. But I want to ask you just directly, what do you think is the biggest thing, or a couple of the biggest things that keeps anybody from starting anything?
It's the fear of, I'm not going to succeed, or the fear of maybe my circle, my friends, my family, my colleagues won't like me. My relationships won't be the same if I succeed. I think I see that a lot for people.
You think it's more of that inner circle kind of community ripple that is keeping people from starting their biggest endeavors?
At times, yeah, because I think you don't want things to change around you. And the fact is, things will change. You'll find out some friends, some family who can really hang with you as you continue to succeed and risk. And there's some that are just going to fall away. And you have to live with that. And that happened with me as well, where there were people who were like, yeah, you should try it. You should go. And then once I started to have success, I would feel a little envy or jealousy or whatever it is. It's disappointing. It hurts. But I think for a lot of us, we want to stay in our box.
What would you recommend anyone to do? Because the fear of starting is big enough, is big enough already for a lot of us. But then what I'm kind of hearing you say is we tend to kind of take on the fear of other people, the fear of others, of how they're going to change, or how this dynamic might change between us because of me taking action with something I want in my life and for my life. So how do we really parse and navigate the fear, our own fear, compared to the influence of fear of other people that we genuinely care about? Do we prioritize them? Do we go about them differently, or fear is fear is fear is fear?
No, I think you create a front row. This is a key concept. for me in my life, in my book, everything in a front row are the people who are also doing big things. And it may not be your mom. It may not be your best friend because they want you to stay safe, understandably. So your front row are people who are either doing big things on their own, doesn't even have to be your same field. It can be people who are where you want to be, some mentors who you can reach out to. But your front row is going to tell you the truth. They're going to push you forward. They're going to lift you up, right? And they're going to reevaluate with you. And it's critical to have that front row. And everybody else is still around. Your friends are still around. But the front row is who you go to for advice and who you go to for consolation and who you go to for ideas and brainstorming. Because you can't control what everybody's going to think. Our fear with other people changing, it's about fear of judgment, right? Somebody's going to judge us. They're going to think, for me, going on air was like, who does she think she is? That she could go on camera and people are going to listen to her. Or it can be, he's getting too big for his britches now that he's got this kind of success. That's their problem. That is, my father was the greatest, right? Just a huge cheerleader of me. One time he said when I was 11, Emery, you're getting a little bit cocky. Poor man.
At
right?
11?
At 11. Who knows what it was? I held on to it forever. Literally, as I was writing the book, I looked up the definition of cocky. One night I was like, I'm just going to look it up. The definition of cocky is so sure of one's abilities that it annoys other people. And I was like, wait a second. So sure of one's abilities? Yes, I'm sure of my abilities. That it annoys other people? Well, as my teenagers would say, that's OPP. That's other people's problems. And that shifted everything for me because we're letting other people's feelings about what we're doing stop us from doing the thing.
Yeah. What if we don't have fear about starting something, but we have this front row to these people, these friends, advisors that we really value and trust? And if they're being honest, I hope they are, they present reasonable, rational fears for, hey, maybe now's not the right time, or maybe you should do this before that, or have you thought about this? When is it pertinent to take on the fears of trusted other people? Is that ever the case? Should we ever let other people's fears become our own fears or just take them under consideration?
I think you have to examine all of it. Is it really for your front row, if they're carefully curated, is it their fears or are they giving you different scenarios? Because if they're putting their fears on you, fear of failure, for example, or exposure or embarrassment, maybe they shouldn't be in your front row. Now, if they're giving you real advice, hey, Chase, I like the idea, but here's something for you to consider. Here's something for you to consider financially, whatever it is. That's why they're in your front row.
Right, yeah.
Because they're going to tell you the truth. Everybody's coming at you from a lens. That's why I said it's not your mom and it's not your best friend because they just want you to be safe. And maybe they have a fear of whatever, public speaking, being exposed, starting a family, as you talked about earlier. So if it's fears, no, don't take on somebody else's fears. But if your front row is telling you their fears, they may not be the right people for your front rows. This is your board of directors, is your front row.
Yeah.
It's their role to present ideas to you, including potential pitfalls.
Could not agree more. So let's say, we've navigated our fears. We've gone through the advice and separated fears of this front row committee in our life, and we're taking action.
Right.
We start the side hustle, we apply for this job, whatever that thing is that we're here to advance forward in. Once we're there, I think it's human nature to just go, all right, don't screw this up. Don't fail. And I think to some degree that can help drive us. That can give us motivation. The fear of failing can work to our advantage, but how would you recommend, navigating that relationship of fear once we do get started in a healthy way?
Well, let's talk about failure first. What's the definition of failure?
That's why you're here.
Right? In any particular endeavor, what's the definition of failure? So, as I said, for me on air for the first time, failure was being bad at it, being exposed, being judged, being embarrassed. All that happened, right? You're going to be bad your first time on television, much less your first time on television in 78 million homes or whatever it is. So if that's failure, then I failed and got up and did it again. And each time I did it, I was still bad, the second, the 15th, whatever it is, but you're getting a little bit of information. So honestly, Chase, I don't believe in failure. Like, failure is just all data to me, information for me. Now, this is why I'm saying don't take your life savings and, bet it all. There's a certain component that I call packing your parachute, where and I say to people, parachute is not to bail on your dreams, by the way. It's to ensure a softer landing.
Oh, I like that. Right? Yeah, that's a good reminder.
Yeah. So failure there is really just data. And when you're packing your parachute, it means you've got your systems in place. You've got your front row. You're making smart financial decisions, smart decisions with your time as well. So I guess I just don't believe in actual failure. It's just all information to help me move forward in the next process.
I want to go back to what you were talking about of really defining failure. I think it's so helpful for us to understand, to really think about and map out, okay, this is what I'm afraid of. This is what fear could look like in terms of failure for this endeavor, and get very granular to this could define failure. This could be a failure. This could be a failure, so that we kind of maybe know what to look out for, how to your point, build a parachute, build a contingency plan for this soft landing. So walk us through, if you can, even more of how do we really define unique failures for each unique situation and to plan accordingly?
So I think the first thing you got to do is just make friends with fear. Okay. If you make friends with fear and realize it doesn't get to make decisions, it doesn't drive you, but it is always going to be a passenger, and stop using all that energy to push it away. I think we do that all the time. Like, conquer your fears, push your fears, overcome your fears. Yeah. Look, they're a passenger in your life for the entire time, and they can help guide you. Then if we want to use the word failure, right? Then what does it mean? And I guess we're going to have to redefine that. Because if you want to use the word failure, then we need to know, are you going to fail forward? Are you going to learn something from each time it doesn't go your way?
Please go deeper here. I think so many of us have this idea of, if I fail, that automatically means I'm taking a step back. I'm regressing in my goals and in my life. How do we adopt this mentality? And what does it really look like to choose to fail forward?
Right. It requires audacity, right? The willingness to take a bold risk. And what's going to happen there is you need to put away other people's ideas of what it should look like and have a very clear vision of your next step. So let's say you start a podcast, okay? And it's not going well. You don't have your audience. You are having a hard time getting guests. Well, you don't just quit on that, but you do need to have the data. Maybe you go to your front row and say, do you have any ideas how to get better, how to get more guests and stuff? But it is a mind shift, big time, in terms of failure. I'll give you a different example. I was working with somebody who wanted to become a commercial real estate agent. He was in business, and this is something he felt would give him more flexibility, a bit greater income, all that. So when we talked, I said, what's the issue? And he said, well, I need to study for the test. I'm afraid I'm going to fail the test. Okay, test is $60. There's no limit to how many times you can take the test. So I said, okay, so just go take the test. And he goes, well, I'll fail. And I said, I understand. He goes, you want me to fail on purpose? I said, no, but if failure is what's stopping you, I assume you're going to fail the test because you haven't studied. So get that out of the way. So he took the test. He failed. He was like, see, I told you I failed. I said, great. Now that's out of the way. What's the next fear? You don't have enough time. Worked with his family on it, how he created an hour block each day, which I believe you need to have. For him, it was 2 half-hour segments before the kids got up and when the kids were in the bath. So he could be out for book and bed, as every parent knows,
I'll be there soon.
It's going to be amazing. Bath, book, bed at the end of every night.
That sounds great. I want that in my life. I should have that.
I know, exactly. Well, you're about to have it.
Not even my kid. But
yeah, exactly. You're about to have it in your life. So once he was able to carve out that time, then he was able to study for the test, took it again, failed again, okay? Learned where he was most deficient, refined his studying process, took it again, succeeded, passed the test, left his other job. He's a commercial real estate agent doing well, very, very well now. But those 2 times failing the test he recalibrated in his head. That's information for him. And that's the way he was able to fail forward. Expected to fail the first time. Second time, failed, learned from it data-wise, and went back a third time.
This brings me home to this kind of third concept I had in mind, and that's the inevitable failure.
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody, please correct me if I'm wrong if you have, but they chose to do something, they started it, and it went just perfectly.
No one.
Anything and everything they had in mind of what this is going to look like, feel like, success, whatever it looks like, it just worked. I don't know anyone like that. If you do, please let me know.
No.
But so if we can just wrap our head around, kind of like your example of your friend here, this inevitable failure that is going to happen. If we choose to get out of bed today, there's going to be a failure in some capacity. So how do we accept this inevitable failure as part of the journey to life and success? And how do we use it to our advantage, even navigate through it?
Right. Well, if you're not failing, you're not doing enough. So that's the first thing I'll say. If you have big goals, if you're perfectly content with every area of your life, good for you. I don't know people who really are. But if you're not failing, you're not pushing enough. And I ask people to look at 3 different components in their life. There's an assessment in the back of the book. And it goes on, first part is career, professional life, then health and wellness, and then your relationships. Romantic, friendships, familial, whatever it is. And this assessment to help you determine where in your life you need maybe to be the most audacious, to risk the most. After I wrote the assessment, I took it, right? I took my own assessment. Career and professional, going really well. Health and wellness, I'm doing a good job. Relationships, I was spending so much time, right, on my career and then, of course, taking care of myself as well, that I was losing touch with some of my friends.
Yeah. How did you know that? How did you kind of quantify that? Was it did you have a metric, this, kind of assessment in the book you're talking about? Or was it just like a feeling, more quantitative or qualitative?
No.
Relationships can be tricky to really measure. Am I succeeding or failing, right?
Right.
To be objective about them yourself.
Right. Exactly. No, it's point scoring once you take the assessment and you go through and you're asking yourself about your feelings of connection with people, about how much time you're spending, connecting, how much you're getting back, any of that. There's an assessment and it's literally just point scoring.
Oh,
and
great,
you can
great.
see like professional and career, points were good. Health and wellness, points were good. Relationships, points were not good.
So what did you do about that?
So I made more time, conscious time, the scheduling time to be with community, with friends. With my children, always had enough time there. But I did get better about turning everything off. Like, don't even think about calling me when I'm with my kids. You will not get a hold of me because I travel so much.
Yeah.
And then I would literally be very conscious in calling friends up because I needed to reconnect. Like they were still there, but they'd been blown off by me enough times that I needed to reconnect and say, hey, do you have time for lunch in the next 2 weeks? Or, hey, you want to do a FaceTime wine across the country kind of thing? But scheduling that the same way I scheduled my workouts, the same way I scheduled my career.
Yeah. That's so important. I'm really glad to hear that's working for you because I do something similar and it's paramount. Social relationships, our community are everything. And to our earlier point, your earlier point, if we're not prioritizing that, then how are we going to have that committee, that front row committee, to be that sounding board, to get the advice, to navigate the fears? It all matters. It all matters.
Well, if I can go, our Surgeon General talked about a loneliness epidemic in this country, right? Because you can have dinner delivered to your door. You can ask ChatGPT how to run your business. I mean, you don't need to leave anymore. And so that's part of what the front row does is create significance, right? Significance is value and worth. So when you're asking someone, and I recommend Chase actually using the words, hey, here's something I want to do. Will you be in my front row?
Okay.
Will you be in my front row?
So naming it, labeling it. It's also kind of like giving an authority and a position to people.
Exactly. A value, a worth, a role. So now you're reestablishing social connections as well, which fights that loneliness epidemic. And when we have value in any position, whether it's in our job, in our family, or in our friendships, when we have value, then we're invested. When you tell somebody, hey, Chase, I want to do this, and it's a little scary for me. And will you be in my front row? Well, all of a sudden, now you're invested in what I'm trying to do. Hopefully it's reciprocal, right? And now you have combated a little bit of the loneliness epidemic. You've created significance. You've strengthened your social connections. So it all weaves together.
Yeah. And just communicating stuff like that, I think, can go a long way to your point of reducing fear in relationships.
Yep.
Because how many of us, as life goes on, life gets busier, and we fear like, oh, we were such close friends. I'm afraid we're not going to be as close, or we're drifting apart, or did I do something wrong? But just keeping that little thread of communication can really mitigate or eliminate even a lot of that fear in other people's minds about what we're up to and how we can stay together. Does this tie into another concept in the book is, ego, and kind of recognizing ego, befriending ego, just checking it, bringing it into the concept of fear and taking bold action. What role does ego take, and why is it important to keep it at the table?
Right. Well, we learned about id, ego, and superego, right? Yeah. As we were all growing up. So the id is when your being says, I got this awesome idea. Let's, do this. And your superego is saying, oh, that's too risky. That's really scary. That's something that, you're just better off being safe, because your superego is kind of like your inner critic, and your ego is trying to find a reasonable way to satisfy both.
Okay.
It's trying to say, I see where you're going with the big idea. However, I see what you're saying about the risk over here and how we're going to make it work. And so ego, I think a lot of us thought was, oh, my big ego, and I'm the greatest. I don't see ego that way. I see ego as trying to navigate the safest route for us to our dreams while still being somewhat safe and pushing. So it's important to recognize all of that. The voice in our head, right, that inner critic, some people don't really acknowledge it, or they think that's them. That voice that's saying the negative things.
Yeah.
It's not you. I picked up my daughter, who 11 years old, from school, and I was like, hey, how's school today? And she's like, well, I'm stupid. I can't do math. And oh, by the way, I'm fat. Oh, no. And I was like, yo, sis, like at middle school age. And so we had the discussion, which always starts with, would you say that to me? Would you say that to your friends? And the answer is always, of course not. I would never go to somebody and be like, you're stupid, you can't do math, and you're fat. I was like, okay, so we're pretty clear that that's not you saying that. So let's separate that inner voice from ourselves and give it a name, so that we're not saying it's Chase talking to Chase. So she picked the name Jerry. And I said, great. And I said, what would you tell Jerry if he tells you all those things? And she said, I would say, shut up, Jerry. And I said, exactly. So let's understand that Jerry's going to be talking to you. There might be a nugget of truth in there once in a while. So you can be curious about it without being emotional about it. And then recognize, once that's separated, are you really getting any help from your inner critic? Usually not. And so still, when I hear her in the other room and she's doing her homework and she goes, ugh, I can't do this, I'll yell, shut up, Jerry, from like the other room. And she'll be like, that's fine. But it's that recognition of the voice. And I think a lot of us let it play in a loop in the background. Bring it forward and say, okay, say it. What have you got? That's not helpful. I have an answer back. If you can create a dialogue with your inner voice to say, that's not really helpful right now, or I'll take it under consideration, or you might be right, I'll look into it, but recognizing it's not the driver of us. It's just more information.
Now, what about if we come up against a similar feeling, but it's more intuition instead of Jerry? How do we navigate and differentiate between the voice in the back of our head, that fear driver, and that gut check, intuitive response of, hey, maybe this really is or is not the right course of action?
Right. I think it's all about creating all the possible outcomes and the action plans of it. So let's say it's your intuition. It doesn't feel good to put this much money into a particular venture. Okay. That's your intuition telling you. So let's figure out a different way, and you're going to back that up.
Is that more of a feeling, or how do we really kind of tap in and go, is there certainty to be had of intuition versus fear?
Right. Well, do the data of it. Is intuition telling you financially that's a risk that doesn't make sense to me? That's not just fear. If you're figuring out, okay, if this doesn't work right now, this way, it will put me in jeopardy with my finances, with my home, with whatever. You got to listen to that.
Okay.
If your fear becomes something more ethereal, something about a reaction externally by somebody else, that's definitely a fear. That's not an intuition. If I do this, I'm going to look silly. No, that's not intuition. That's a fear. If I do this, I'm going to have, and it doesn't work, I'm going to have trouble paying my rent. That's something that needs to be examined in a different way in intuition. And remember, you've got your front row to bounce things off of. Carefully curated, doesn't need to be a lot of people, but they need to be people going, I don't know, I'm feeling a little uncertain about this. What do you think? And they may be able to offer some ideas for you to explore your intuition a little bit further and dissect, is it really intuition or is it one of your fears kind of coming up and masquerading as, you should definitely listen to me.
I love that aspect of an invitation to explore.
Yes.
If we can do that with and for ourselves, but be that sounding board for other people, if we can invite let me go back to say that again. If we can invite the exploration of what we're feeling,
yes,
of what we're fearful of,
yes,
that is a very, I think, productive environment to be in.
Yes, I agree. Because again, when we think about fear in general, the way that we've been taught, it's about pushing it away. Where I'm saying bring it in and get curious about it. What am I afraid of? And then explore that. Are you afraid of losing your life savings? Well, that's a big problem. And that's more than just a fear. That's something that needs to be mitigated. Are you afraid of being judged? By whom? By somebody sitting on their mother's couch in the basement eating chips while they're judging you taking action? Why are you giving them a vote or a voice? My friend Laura Gassner-Otting says, don't give a vote to anyone who shouldn't even have a voice.
LGO, she's a friend of the show. She's been on before. Yeah,
she's wonderful.
She's
and
badass.
That's one of her key concepts. And I think it's really true. Like, why would you allow them to have a vote in your life if they're not trying to do big things themselves?
That's I'm just gonna leave that right there. That's so perfect, so perfect. You brought up this word a couple of times already, and that's the forefront of the book, the title, even audacity. That's not a very common word. What do you mean by it? What is your definition of it, and why is it so important when we're talking about understanding fear and overcoming fear and letting the impediment to action become action?
Audacity in this country has had sometimes a negative connotation, right? So
the nerve, the audacity.
Yeah, my parents would say to me occasionally, you have the audacity to ask me that or whatever it is. That's where it came up. I was like, Mom, good job by you. But when you look up audacity, it's the willingness to take bold risks. I don't believe that we're necessarily born with that willingness to take bold risks. That's why I called the book Cultivating Audacity, because you need to grow it. You need to practice it.
So it's not something we either have or don't have. It's
Absolutely
something that anyone can invite in and grow it.
Yes, exactly. And I think a lot of people will say, well, you're so brave, especially in my career now. Well, you're so brave. Are you kidding? I was so shy. I'm an introvert by nature, even though I talk for a living. And so what I learned in exploring my own audacity and redefining it, this willingness to take bold, sometimes surprising risks, is that it comes in three components. And there is the mindset. An audacious mindset, which is really just about optimism, Chase. Like if you're playing in a basketball game and you're losing by 12 at the half, why do you come out for the second half? Because you're thinking maybe if we get our offense together, if our defense is better, we might win. We might not, but I'm going to survive the outcome either way. And that's the mindset, that optimism of knowing no matter what happens, we're going to survive. We're not going to die destitute and alone. So the mindset. But you can be optimistic all day long and nothing's going to happen if you're sitting on the couch. So the second is audacious behavior. And a lot of people will stop right there saying, I want to be whatever, but don't take the action toward it. So audacious behavior is where the real practice comes.
Good distinguishing trait there. Okay,
and it can be very small. And you can start immediately with the word no to something where you would have normally said yes, or you would have said, no, I can't because, and give this long explanation why. It can just be no. But when I'm coaching people, I'm saying do something unexpected today in your behavior. maybe it's reaching out to somebody who's doing what you want to do and see if they respond to you. If you're reaching out to them on social media or whatever it is, people kind of tend to want to help sometimes. And by reaching out to them, you'll get a lot of rejections. That's okay. But maybe somebody will help. So do something behaviorally. The third component is the audacious identity. And that's when you marry the first two, the behavior, the mindset and the behavior consistently. When you consistently have that optimism and you consistently take action, that's when you go from, what is Chase doing? To, that's Chase. He swings for the fences. That's the way it goes. And that audacious identity is where you really start to cultivate.
I did bat fourth.
There we go.
Growing up. So I was always swinging for the fences.
I love that. Yes.
Yeah, I played baseball my whole life, my whole childhood. Yeah.
Yeah. Cleanup is definitely an audacious spot. I love it.
So you also talk about this concept of time versus money. And I think that's a very fearful component, or two components, when we're thinking about starting something or even scaling something, taking that thing to the next level.
Right.
Do I have the right amount of time? Do I have the money? Or I might have both now, but what is it going to cost me in time later? What is it going to cost me in money later? How do we weigh this time versus money so that we can really assess our tasks and get things done this year more?
Right. That's two huge reasons why people wait to be audacious. When I have more time, when I have more money. So two components. Let's talk about time for a second. Life is urgent. We have this urgency fallacy that anything that's urgent is really important. And it tends to not be, honestly. The urgent stuff, answer the text, the email, sign the permission slip, whatever it is for your kid, it needs to be done. But things that are urgent by nature are reactive. You ask me for something, I'm going to get it to you. Things that are important move us forward, closer to our values, visions, goals, who we want to be. They require a little more consideration and careful planning. And we all like to check things off our list.
Love it.
Right?
Love it. How many of us add things to our to-do list that we know we're going to do no matter what? Or, raise my hand here, I've already done these, but I just want to look and see, like, oh yeah, I did do that. Oh, that feels good. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
I'm the same way. You'll add it in. You'll be like, oh, and by the way, I did this, so I'm going to put it there and cross it off. So there's that satisfaction, and there's an impending deadline. For things that are important, oftentimes there's not a deadline, right? It's about you moving forward in your goals, but there's consequences if you don't do them. So the first thing I tell people is differentiate between urgent and important.
Okay.
And you need to make room for important, because if you are waiting until you take care of your urgent stuff, it never ends. Urgent never ends. And so if you're trying to create something new, trying to move yourself forward, you need to schedule time for important, which means you shut everything down. So for me, for writing the book, I thought, well, I'm going to get up at 4:30 every morning and write for an hour before the kids get up, which I did. And it was horrible.
Why?
I was exhausted.
So you weren't already getting up at that time?
No, I don't get up at 4:30 in the morning and everything. So I was exhausted every day. And then if I had, because I'm still a very working broadcaster, so if I had an 8:00 game at night, forget it. By the time the kids would ask me for dinner, I'd be like, grumpy. So I needed a different system. So what worked for me was 4 15-minute blocks. I literally wrote my book in 15-minute blocks.
4 15-minute blocks.
Every
so you
day.
just found 15-minute pockets throughout your day?
I scheduled them.
Wow.
So I would have an alarm go off on my phone. And as soon as it went off, I would turn off my phone, set a timer for 15 minutes and write. And let me tell you, when you have 3 kids, sometimes that happens in the bathroom because you can lock all the doors and you're in there and the kids are like, Mom, I'm hungry. And I'm like, same. I'll be out in 15 because that's not an emergency, right? Your kid being hungry. I will feed you in 15 minutes. And that's the way I did it. Other people do 3 20-minute blocks. I told you about somebody else I worked with who did 2 half-hour blocks. But once you schedule that time, and it's non-negotiable, to reply to a text can wait 15 minutes, right? For an email, 15 minutes. Yeah. Everything can wait 15 minutes is my theory. So that's the first component, is finding that. For money, what I learned eventually is that money is really energy. They talk about money is time. Money is energy. We all have our money stories that we grow up with, and you have to look through those. And I have a whole section in the book where you're digging into your money story and your attitude toward it. Some people don't even want to look at their money. They don't even want to look at the bank balance. And I literally work it in like when you're brushing your teeth, take a look every day and be grateful for what it is. If it's $10, thank you, $10. If it's $1,000, whatever it is that's in there. But the next component with money is recognizing sometimes you need to buy back energy or buy back time.
What do you mean by that?
So for me, I'm a working broadcaster, I'm an author, I'm a keynote speaker, and I'm a mother of 3. So I don't know why I thought about writing a book with all of this going on.
Why not?
Yeah, why not? Why not? And so I was overwhelmed early on. And I realized that I was going to have to part with some of my money because I'm a saver. This is the way I grew up, was holding it tight, and spend some money on somebody to help me with the aspects of my day that I don't enjoy. And I did it in a couple of different ways. One, I don't like doing the contracts, writing up the contracts, chasing down payment, any of that. So I have an assistant who did that for me. When the kids were younger, and it was a big thing for me because I always had like, I want to raise my kids.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. Well, there are some, I think. But
touche.
Yeah, but I want to raise my kids. So I don't want to have a nanny or an au pair or this or that. And then I realized I needed an au pair to take care of the things that I didn't want to do to free me up to spend more time with my kids.
Beautiful.
So
beautiful.
For me, my au pair, she would go grocery shopping and she would prep dinner. I liked to cook dinner. So she would prep the food. So I'd come in like a chef. The kids would be there.
Yeah, the sous chef got it all lined up for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'd eat dinner and then I would walk away from the table. She would do the dishes because I'd go up to do bath, book, and bed. So I bought back more time with my kids and less time doing things I didn't want to do. And that's the way we can use money to buy back energy and time for the things that are important to us.
That I think is one of the most difficult concepts for people, especially new entrepreneurs or growing entrepreneurs, myself included over the years, of just like, what do you mean? I don't have enough money to do the things, but you're telling me if I spend money that I maybe don't have or I'm fearful of going away to get back the time, I can generate more money or generate more joy. I'm here to tell you, friends, it absolutely works out. If you just get granular with the priorities and what you're going to do, don't spend money to get back time and then squander it.
No.
Have a plan in place. That time will generate more money so you can just kind of feed the machine more and more and get back to the things that matter most.
Yes. Yeah. As soon as I hired the assistant to take care of the contracts and the payment and all of that, I was able to spend more time prospecting speaking gigs, which increased my income, which meant I could pay her with no problem and still have excess.
Woo, love it. Yeah. Love it. Okay, so I have a couple quotes. I looked up failure, and I want to kind of just get your take on them.
Let's go.
Truman Capote. Failure is the condiment that gives success its flavor. How does that land on you?
It lands beautifully because here's the deal. How would you know you're successful if you haven't experienced failure? How would you know, like for being on air, for example, if I was bad, how would I ever know that I had improved if I hadn't really dug in and been bad? So I completely agree. And it's not ketchup, it's mustard, by the way, because ketchup's all sugary and this and that. And mustard has a little bit of a tang, a little bit of sour in there.
And it's pure.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, a little sour with the failure, but then it sweetens the outcome. So Truman Capote, right on.
I'm team mustard over here. I love the incorporation of the flavor in there as well.
Well, he said condiments. So, I mean, ketchup's not a real thing for me.
Yeah. Winston Churchill. Quote, success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm.
Oh, I love that. I love that, isn't it? Because each failure, and again, I've kind of eliminated the word failure from my life, meaning anything other than like information or data. But going from failure to failure is information, and it's not a straight line success, right? So you go here, that didn't work, here, up, until you reach your final destination, which is never really final.
I was going to say, it's not real.
It's not really final. You just keep growing. But people like to say when. Once you get to when, you realize, no, I'm not done in any way. So I love that it is taking those moments when things don't go the way you want. How about that? I'll call that failure. When things don't go the way you want and learning from them. It's not a period at the end of the sentence. It's just a comma redirecting you. That's all it is.
Turn the page, my friends, turn the page. You got a blank one waiting for you.
Yeah.
All right, this one I thought would be more up your alley. Mr. Michael Jordan, all right?
Oh, yeah.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed.
Right.
I've failed over and over and over again in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I succeed.
That's right. I like to tell people I failed more times than you tried when people are thinking about it. Because what they see, right, is the tip of the iceberg. If you picture an iceberg, they see this much, and under the water is all of this. So people will say to me occasionally, I want to be on television. How do I get good? Well, you get good by failing repeatedly and surviving and getting information. People want to see Michael Jordan and say, he's the greatest of all time. What happened there? Well, he got cut in junior high from basketball team. He didn't make the team. So it is about getting up every time and taking all of those failures, all that information with you to go. 26 times he's missed the shot. How many times has he made the game-winning shot? Hundreds.
And, I'm not the biggest sports guy, but I know Michael Jordan.
There we go.
Fun fact, I went to middle school with JJ Redick.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I used to watch him. I think he was a grade above me, but now he's the coach here, LA. And shout out Cave Spring Middle School back in Roanoke, Virginia. Yeah.
Let me say one other thing about Michael Jordan. So I covered Jordan a lot when I was a producer at ESPN, including when he went to go to baseball. You remember when he did the little foray?
Of course.
Into Major League
which
Baseball.
A lot of people would say that was a failure in his career.
Yeah.
Right?
No way. Right? He needed to try something different. And what excited him was being the newbie again and not being just the expert in something. And the way that he put himself in a position to fail publicly, right? Because people will say, oh, he's not good. But he blocked all that out. Kobe was another tremendous one at blocking everybody out. I was a Los Angeles bureau producer for ESPN for many years, including Kobe's first day in LA. And I
covered Kobe's first day?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I covered Kobe forever. So his very first day, in practice, we were there for the press conference too. I mean, he's a teenager. Announced. So we're in practice. It's an open practice for media. He comes in, and I think we all had this idea that he would come in and kiss the ring. Like he's a teenager and he was going to be maybe a little unsure, defer to the other guys. And he didn't. I mean, Kobe Bryant is exactly who you think he was. He came in confident of his abilities there, didn't kiss the ring. Media loved it.
At what, 17, right?
17 when he signed, yeah. I think he was 18 by the time he showed up for his first practice, but 17 when he signed. Media loved it, of course. It ruffled some feathers for his teammates. But the fact that he was able to come in and recognize that there were going to be a lot of critics within his area. And in the locker room, there was some animosity towards him. But he kept focused on what he was doing. And eventually, right, it worked out. He and Shaquille O'Neal learned how to work together. They won championships together. So it's a matter of like keeping your ideas of who you are and blocking out the noise in every way. Jordan did it with baseball. Kobe did it with being a young teenager. We can all do it in any aspect of our lives and say, here's what I'm going to do. There's going to be critics. That's okay.
And, thinking of the greats, the GOATs, like Kobe, Jordan, anybody in their field, Steve Jobs, anybody who's at the top of their game.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on this concept of how our fear could actually be the most selfish thing in the world. What I mean by that is, what if Jordan, because of his fear, stopped after he got cut in high school? What if Kobe let the fear of, I'm only 17 going into the NBA. What if he stopped playing? What if Jobs didn't invent the iPhone? What if the person listening right now has the next great idea?
Right.
But their fear of starting or sharing or introducing it to the world is keeping them there. Think about what it is doing for society. How many other people did Jordan and Kobe and Steve Jobs, all these other people like inspire to take action?
Right.
Walk us through this concept of our fear can actually be selfish.
Yes. And my question would be like, what is the fear of? Right. So for Jordan, let's say, right, he got cut and decided not to go. What was the fear of? Is the fear of getting cut again? Is that what it is? Of failing again? Because I think when you get curious about your fear, then it can kind of open things up for you. So I think there's a responsibility for all of us to kind of create, I don't know, a more connected community, certainly just not for our kids, but by way of saying, hey, I tried this, it didn't work. Other people can learn from your experience. I tried this worked. Other people can learn from your experience. So selfishly, if you shut it down, your great ideas, you're not just limiting yourself, you're limiting other people who are trying to do the same thing or trying to expand on that idea. So yeah, it is selfish because you're denying the world your lessons.
And, yourself included. I mean, think about how many other young, budding female broadcasters, sports journalists, or anybody in the media field maybe found you, saw you do your thing, and that inspired them to take action. I mean, you've been in this, 30 years now?
35 years, yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
That's
it's been
incredible.
fun.
Yeah.
It's a great job. But I'll tell you, I learned from other people that I worked with and other women. And I talked to you about crying outside the stadium before my first ever time. Right before I went on the air, one of my colleagues who I used to produce for called me. And she said, how's it going? And I was like, oh, not good. Not good at all. I'm pretty sure I'm about to throw up on live television. And she's like, listen, no matter how bad it is, it's not going to be as bad as my first time on television. And I was like, oh God, that just made it worse. Like, what happened to you? What happened to you your first time on television? And what had happened to her was one of the quarterbacks in the match or in the football game that she was calling was a Heisman contender. There was some conversation around him. So when the play-by-play and analyst in the booth talked about him, she said to the producer, I can add to the conversation. That's the way you do it as a sideline reporter. You say, I can add. And then they say, okay, for more, let's go down to the field. So when they came to her, it was her first time on television. And what they tell you as a sideline reporter is to be the eyes and the ears of the viewer. What would they not know unless you're on the field? So she's adding by saying, guys, I know that you've talked about this particular athlete as a possible Heisman contender, but the fans down here disagree.
Oh.
They're chanting, Heisman, my ass, you suck, you suck. Bob, back to you. Right? And I was outside the stadium about to go on, and I thought, you know what? You're right. I'm not going to swear on live television.
You're right. You had it worse.
Yeah. I'm like, you're right. I'm not going to do that. I may be terrible, but I'm not going to do that. She still had a full career after that, a very successful one, which is why I have not used her name.
That?
Yeah. Why, but the point being, she didn't let that stop her. She kept going. And so when somebody gives you that gift, right? And that's where we talk about selfish and fear. She could have chosen A, to never keep going, or B, not to tell me that story. But she shared it with me. She gave me permission to use it in the book. She gave me permission to use it in interviews. I just don't reveal her name. Although she didn't even say I couldn't use her name. I just don't want to do that to her. But that's a perfect example of letting fear be selfish. And instead, she was generous with her fear and said, I know you're afraid. Here's what happened to me. It's not going to happen to you because most people don't swear on live television. Yeah. And I still survived and had a great career.
I love these two concepts you're introducing here of we're talking about fear being selfish and fear being generous.
Yes.
I love how we're kind of just navigating a new mindset to fear. And when we think fear, we think a lot of things. We've all been afraid at some point in our life, and we probably will be again. And that just gets boxed in.
Right.
But like anything in life, and what I believe the whole concept of the show to help us move forward in these aspects is to just like get ourselves out of that, to look at it, this 3,000, 10,000 foot perspective, get objective perspective, get out, dance around it, look at it. There are so many other ways to navigate it. Fear can be selfish, but it can also be generous.
Absolutely.
How novel is that for a lot of us right now?
Absolutely. I made a decision to show my kids my failures, my fears, the things I'm upset about. My oldest son is in my front row. He's 20, right? My family's all great, but this one is in my front row because he just gives me sound advice. He lets me bounce things off of him. And so he has more than once been great about my successes. He'd be like, yeah, you're killing it speaking. So I decided to show him all the rejections.
Oh, wow.
Hey, buddy, I just sent out 15 prospecting calls. I didn't get a call back from any of those. He's like, wow, that's rough. I'm like, not really. I mean, that's just information. This is what happens, because I didn't want them to see only successes and think, she's just lucky or she's just good at this. And there was one time in particular where I had a job set, but I was waiting for the contract and the contract didn't come. And finally I called the production company and was like, what's going on? And they said, well, the head coach and GM of the team has decided he wants somebody else. And I mean, I had already cleared my schedule for this. And I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean? I haven't even.
They just left you hanging?
Yeah. I was like, I hadn't even met him. And they were like, well, he's more comfortable with his buddy. And I was like, okay, you tell him I'm coming. When? Today. Okay. Right now? Yes. I walked out of my office. I'm crying. I'm a crier, right? The kids see me and I'm like, don't let anybody ever, the kids are like scared, like mommy's really upset. I'm like, don't let anybody ever tell you. Blah. And they're like, where are you going? I'm like, to the airport. Went to the airport. It was a short flight, bought a ticket, off the plane, Uber to the office, sat down, and the guy did not want to see me, obviously.
Of course.
Right? And he said, look, it's nothing personal. And I said, well, of course it's personal. I'm a person. I'm sitting right here. What's the issue? And he just trusted the other person. I understand that, somebody he had worked with before. And I said, well, do you think that's the right person for this audience, though? Which was mostly a female LGBTQ plus audience. Like, is this older man going to be the one to relate there? And we had a great conversation where I decided to start challenging him on some of his decisions, because at this point I didn't have the job, right? And this is the fear component that I talk about. They can't fire you if they haven't hired you.
Oh, true. Very true. Yeah.
I live by that.
So what do you have to lose at this point?
Zero. So I had the conversation with him. And then at the end, I decided to take an audacious risk because, again, I wasn't working for this guy anyway. And I said, listen, thank you for meeting with me. I'm going to let you know I don't want to work for you. And he was like, what? And, you flip here. And I said, because the very last thing I want is to show up to work every day in the gym. It was for a professional basketball team. Show up and have you be like, here's that woman I didn't want to hire anyway. And I said, so if the production company tells me they want me, if the ownership tells me, it's only you. If you decide you want me, I'm in. Otherwise, forget it. I'm out. When I went home, production company called and said, I don't know what happened in there, but he said he wants you. He said she knows basketball and she's got, balls, and gave you a raise. Basketballs. And gave you a raise beforehand because I had no fear of the outcome because I'd already lost.
Yeah.
I already wasn't there. And sometimes those audacious moves, he could have easily still said no. The victory is in the audacious move. It's not in the outcome. So many times we're looking at the outcome and it's actually in the action. That's where the victory is in taking the action.
Love that story. Thank you for sharing. Kind of getting towards the end here. I have a question in mind that I feel like could be a unique spin on our conversation here. What do we do if we feel like the failure is not on us? And what I mean by that is my team let me down. The government is failing us. We can put blame or just shift the weight of failure to others. How do we navigate that? How do we know, yes, actually, someone else failed you because of fear or even just a failure for whatever reason? So how do we navigate life, situation, or career when someone else failed us?
Because we don't have control over what someone else does, right? So if they failed us, what's our next step? I feel like you can spend a lot of energy blaming them. I mean, and it happens all the time in my business, your business, hey, they didn't hire me. They went with somebody else who wasn't good, maybe you think, or whatever it is.
Or how many of us are cursing the algorithm? The algorithm failed me.
Oh, yeah.
My content is a failure because the algorithm is shifting and all this stuff. Yeah.
Right. So that's, again, you're exporting your emotions and your ability and your power by saying it's others that are failing me, because in the end, you're in charge of your life. And so if you're not being supported the way you want in other ways, well, it's your responsibility to adjust. And I know that's happened. I know there's lots of people who, my family has failed me is their story, right? My family has failed me. And that stinks. But you still are in charge of the outcome of your life because you're the one living it. So You can't just sit there and be a victim of it. As much as it stinks, I always say it's not your fault what happened to you, but it's your responsibility to respond to it.
Look, everyone's struggles are their struggles, but you have to come to the realization, I believe, you have to come to the choice that these failures, this suffering might not be your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of times it isn't our fault, whatever it is. But you can either sit and blame, which gets you nowhere, or you can say, I'm going to take action to work with that. And again, anxiety, PTSD, huge, right? Huge. And it's not easy to say, okay, I'm going to take responsibility. What does that look like? But it is, you're able to say, okay, what are my resources? How can I create some other pathways, whether that's getting help in another way or looking into, like, for anxiety, they talk about doing something creative can take your mind out of that space. So all of a sudden, you who's not a painter is like, okay, I'm going to start drawing when I feel anxious and not judge it, just to get my head out of that space. So responsibility, maybe we should use the word privilege.
Ooh.
Right? It's not your
like
fault.
That. Yeah.
But it's your privilege to be able to try something else, to responsibly try something else. That's your gift. You have a choice.
I love that. One question before I get to my final here. As someone that has been in her career and navigating a lot of different offshoots of that for 3 decades now, can you take us back to a time, if is there one in mind, that you would consider your biggest failure? And what is your perspective of it now compared to then?
What is my perspective of it now? I'm trying to think of my biggest failure. I think I'll go back to trying to get that first job out of college. And I was able to get an interview at ESPN for a 6-month temporary job, working 6 at night to 3 in the morning, 6 days a week, Mondays off. And I went in for the interview and they asked me to analyze the Mariners bullpen. And this is before Randy Johnson was on the Mariners bullpen. I know you're not a sports guy and everything.
I know Randy Johnson.
Okay. I had no idea how to analyze the Mariners bullpen. And so I fumbled in the interview. I never really recovered. And at the end, he said, thanks so much, but I'm sorry, you're not what we're looking for. Right? So there's the failure. I had no job. I was going to end up going home and living with my parents. And that isn't what I wanted after college. And the response to that from me, which I'm kind of amazed of now, because I'm like at 21, like, how did you have that guts? But it was more out of desperation, right? Because there's audacity, like taking the bold risk. And then there's like, I need a damn job, kind of thing. I wrote back and I said, thank you very much for the interview. However, I don't feel I showcased what I can really add. You usually have candidates that can spit out stats and numbers. I have a different perspective because I'd already worked in television at my local station. And I wrote this like audacious note saying like, would you please consider, because I think basically saying like, I didn't do a good job of explaining to you how I could add value. They called me back and he said, okay, we'll give you a shot. And when I look back at that now, I think, what if I hadn't written that letter? What would my life be like if I hadn't said, no, let me try again with you? Whole 35-year career that I've absolutely loved would not have happened.
Well, I could not think of a better way to get into my last question, just by that last story and your work thus far, and your perspective on understanding fear, failure, starting, not starting, is why I have you on the show, because you clearly embody this philosophy of living a life ever forward.
Yes.
Those 2 words, Anne-Marie, what does that mean to you? What do they mean to you? How do you live a life ever forward?
That's why I wanted to be on your show, because it is exactly kind of a motto I live by. And that is, no matter what happens, outside forces at us, our own actions create, none of it is a stopping point. When we stop, when we stay the same, we're not growing. So ever forward to me means taking whatever actions are happening and seeing how we can advance them toward living a life that is closer to our values, visions, who we want to be. Not just our job, but our entire life. That's ever forward to me.
Never a right or a wrong answer. Thank you for your interpretation. Where can my audience go to connect with you, get the book? All of this information will be in the podcast show notes and video description box on YouTube. But where are you hanging out the most? Where can they connect with you?
Well, the easiest place is to find me on my website where you can find links to everything. It's annemarieanderson.com. I also love getting notes on social media and questions and stuff. I'm a keynote speaker, so you can also reach me there. Find me on Instagram at AnneMarieAndersonTV or cultivating_audacity.
All right.